I had 45 seconds before dessert spoons touched porcelain and bullets touched bone. That was the math running through my head as I stood at the edge of the dining room, balancing a tray that suddenly felt heavier than it should have. 45 seconds before the room filled with applause for a flambe no one would remember. 45 seconds before a man at table 1 stopped breathing. My hand shook just enough to smear the ink as I folded the receipt into quarters. The paper felt thin. Fragile. Like it might disintegrate before it ever reached him. Around me, the restaurant hummed with the soft, expensive noise of people who believed nothing bad could happen to them, crystal chiming against porcelain, muted laughter, the low brush of silk dresses sliding against leather booths. Somewhere near the bar, ice cracked in a glass. Sharp. Final. Outside, winter slammed itself against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Chicago wind, relentless and angry. Inside, the heat pressed down like a hand on the back of my neck. Too warm. Too tight. The air smelled like butter, truffle oil, and money. I started walking. Table 1 sat by the glass wall, exactly where the view was best and the exits were worst. Kong Min-jun had chosen it deliberately. Men like him always did. He sat with his back straight, shoulders relaxed, as if the city glowing behind him belonged to him. Black hair slicked back. Jaw sharp enough to cut. A suit that cost more than my car, my rent, and my pride combined. His fingers drummed lightly on the table. Slow. Measured. Like a predator counting down heartbeats. Across from him, the woman leaned close, her lips near his ear. Carolina Costa. Perfect makeup. Red lips curved into a smile that would have looked loving to anyone who didn't know better. Her diamond earrings caught the candlelight and scattered it across the tablecloth in fractured rainbows. She laughed softly, one manicured hand resting on his arm. She looked like a fiancée. She wasn't. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been in the wine cellar, surrounded by bottles older than my parents' marriage, when I heard her voice. Italian. Fast. Precise. I hadn't understood every word, but I'd understood enough. Table 1. By the glass. After dessert. Positions confirmed. 1 at the bar. 3 near the kitchen. Clean. The word had landed in my chest like a dropped plate. Now I was walking toward him with that word echoing in my head, each step stretching time thinner and thinner. The carpet muffled my footsteps. The scratch of my polyester uniform against my skin sounded too loud in my ears. I was suddenly aware of everything, my pulse, the way my breath caught, the faint squeak of my shoes on marble. I was a waitress. A black girl in a pale pink button-down and an apron that smelled faintly of red wine and soap. Invisible. Replaceable. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near men like him except to refill their glasses and disappear. He was Korean Mafia. Everyone in the city knew it, even if no one said it out loud. You could feel it in the way people leaned away from his table without realizing why. In the way no one ever accidentally bumped into him. Power radiated from him in quiet, controlled waves. And somehow, impossibly, I was the only person in this room who knew he was about to die. My tray felt like a shield pressed against my chest as I stopped beside the table. Candlelight flickered. The jazz trio in the corner slid into something slow and mournful. Carolina glanced up at me, eyes sharp and assessing, then smiled like she'd never ordered a man's execution in her life. "You're Glenfiddich, sir," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I don't know how." I set the crystal glass down carefully, the whiskey glowing amber as it caught the light. For half a second, everything slowed. The room. The sound. My thoughts. And then I did the one thing every server is trained never to do. I touched him. Just a brush of my thumb against the back of his hand as I slid the folded receipt beneath his coaster. Barely a heartbeat. Barely a violation. But enough. His eyes snapped up to mine. They were darker than I expected. Not cold. Calculating. The kind of eyes that weighed people the way other men weighed gold. For a fraction of a second, the entire room fell away, and it was just us, me, a woman who carried plates, and him, a man who ordered deaths. I held his gaze and mouthed the words I didn't dare speak. Read it. Please. His fingers curled over the receipt, palm flattening it against the table. Covering it completely. Is there a problem with the service, darling? Carolina asked, her voice sweet and sharp all at once. I straightened, my tray clutched tight, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it. Kong Minjun didn't answer her. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact with her. Then, beneath the table, where no one else could see, his other hand unfolded the paper. 7 words. 7 words that could save his life or end mine. I watched his face for any sign. A flinch. A blink. Something. The jazz continued. Laughter rose from a nearby booth. A server passed behind me, whispering about a birthday cake in the kitchen. Nothing happened. Then, just barely, his jaw tightened. It was so small I might have imagined it. But I didn't. He set the glass down with a soft clink that cut through the noise like a knife. And that's when I realized I wasn't supposed to hear any of this. The restaurant liked to pretend nothing bad had ever happened inside it. Marble floors polished until they reflected chandeliers like frozen stars. Leather chairs softened by years of expensive bodies leaning back, confident they belonged anywhere they sat. The air always smelled the same, clarified butter, oak-aged wine, citrus peel twisted just before serving. Controlled. Curated. Safe. That was the illusion. From the outside, it was a temple to wealth. From the inside, it was a machine. Every movement rehearsed. Every smile measured. Every sound engineered to soothe people who believed danger was something that happened to other neighborhoods, other lives. The music never rose above a whisper. Even the laughter felt edited. I moved through it like a ghost. Black dress. Black apron. Black shoes with soles worn thin enough that I could feel every seam in the floor. My name tag said Nia, but no one ever used it. I was Miss Waitress, excuse me. A function, not a person. That invisibility was part of the job. It paid the rent. Barely. 2 months behind on electricity. 1 bounced payment from eviction. A mother who called every Sunday pretending she wasn't worried. A younger brother who thought I had everything figured out because I worked somewhere nice. Nice didn't mean safe. It just meant quiet. I'd learned to read rooms the way some people read books. The shift of shoulders when a bill came. The way couples leaned away from each other when the truth arrived between courses. The subtle stiffness of men who carried weapons they hoped they'd never need. Tonight, the room felt tight. Not loud. Not chaotic. Tight. Like a held breath. Managers floated instead of walked, eyes scanning constantly. Security lingered at corners they didn't usually guard. The sommelier wiped the same glass 3 times without realizing it. Everyone felt it. Table 1 sat at the center of that gravity. Kong Minjun didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture. He barely moved at all. Power radiated from stillness, not noise. He wore a dark suit that looked custom without begging for attention, the kind of fabric that drank in light instead of reflecting it. People like him didn't rush meals. They expected the world to wait. Across from him sat the woman, elegant, composed, lips curved into something that passed for warmth if you didn't look too closely. Her hand rested near his wrist when she laughed. A casual intimacy. A signal. Partner. Lover. Associate. I couldn't tell which yet. She ordered for both of them without asking. He didn't object. Control didn't always look like force. Sometimes it looked like trust. I brought bread. I poured water. I stepped back when the unspoken line was crossed. Everything normal. Everything smooth. If you didn't know how to look, you'd think this was just another rich couple enjoying a quiet night. But there were signs. Minjun never touched the bread. Never reached for the wine until she nodded. His eyes tracked movement more than faces, doorways, reflections, the shadowed edges of the room. When security shifted, his gaze followed, calculating. The woman watched people instead. Staff. Guests. Me. Her eyes lingered a second too long every time I passed. I told myself it was nothing. I needed it to be nothing. I'd grown up learning how to disappear when necessary. When voices got loud. When arguments turned sharp. When being noticed became dangerous. Observation without engagement was survival. That skill had brought me here. It was why I'd noticed the service hallway door earlier. Why I'd recognized the cadence of planning, even when words were fragmented. Why my body had gone cold before my mind caught up. False safety was a powerful drug. The courses arrived in perfect rhythm. Appetizer. Pause. Entree. Pause. Conversations rose and fell like tides. Somewhere, a birthday candle was lit. Someone toasted a promotion. Life continued, unbothered by the fact that it might be about to end for someone else. I kept working. Because that's what ordinary people do when danger feels abstract. They cling to routine like it's armor. I refilled glasses. Cleared plates. Smiled when spoken to. All while counting time in my head without meaning to. All while replaying half-heard phrases like they were clues I hadn't solved fast enough. After dessert. By the glass. Clean. I tried not to look at table one again. It was impossible. Minjun leaned back now, posture loose, one arm draped over the chair like he owned the space around him. The woman spoke softly, her mouth close to his ear, and for a moment he smiled. Not warmth. Satisfaction. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Wealth insulated people from consequences. That was the unspoken rule of places like this. Money softened edges. Smoothed over messes. Made problems disappear quietly. But violence didn't care about decor. The staff felt it too. A runner dropped a fork and flinched like a gunshot had gone off. The hostess kept glancing toward the private rooms, fingers twisting the edge of her clipboard. The kitchen door slammed harder than necessary, the sound echoing too long. Foreshadowing came in whispers, not warnings. When dessert menus were placed, Minjun didn't look at them. He didn't need to. The woman ordered again, something chocolate, something shared. Her voice carried just enough to reach me as I passed. Timing matters, she said lightly. Minjun nodded once. I stopped breathing. The room hadn't changed. Not visibly. But the illusion was cracking, hairline fractures spreading beneath the surface polish. I thought about walking away. About asking to be cut early. About pretending I felt sick. Every option felt like a lie I'd have to live with. Being ordinary didn't mean being blind. I took a step back toward the server station, fingers brushing the edge of the counter for balance. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored wall, eyes too alert, jaw too tight. You don't belong in this, I told myself. But I was already in it. The manager appeared beside me, voice low. Nia. He never used names unless it mattered. There's a bottle missing from the cellar inventory, he said. I need you to check. My stomach dropped. The cellar sat beneath the restaurant, away from the noise, away from witnesses. A narrow space of stone and shadow where sound died quickly and no one lingered longer than necessary. "I can send," I started. "You're closest," he said, already turning away. Decision made. Control reasserted. I looked once more at table 1. The woman was watching me now. Openly. Her smile hadn't changed, but her eyes had sharpened, like she was confirming something she already suspected. Minjun raised his glass. A silent acknowledgement. The countdown wasn't in seconds anymore. It was in steps. I adjusted my apron, smoothed my hands against my thighs, and headed toward the back corridor, past the soft light and polished calm, toward a door that led somewhere private. The door to the cellar didn't close all the way behind me. It caught on something, an uneven hinge, maybe, and stayed open just enough for sound to leak through. A thin slice of the world above. Music dulled. Footsteps blurred. Voices softened into something intimate and dangerous. I stood at the bottom of the steps, clipboard pressed to my chest, and waited for my eyes to adjust. The cellar was colder than the dining room. Not freezer cold. A deliberate chill, engineered to slow time, to preserve what mattered. Stone walls breathed dampness. Rows of bottles lay stacked like sleeping bodies, labels facing outward, necks aligned with military precision. I took one step forward. That's when the voices started again. They weren't meant for me. They weren't loud. They weren't careful either. Foreign syllables slipped through the gap above, Korean first, then Italian, then back again. Not conversational. Transactional. The cadence of people who didn't need to clarify because they already trusted the outcome. I froze. Position confirmed, a man said. Not Minjun, deeper. Older. Another voice answered, female this time. The same smoothness I'd heard at the table, stripped of warmth. No deviation. A pause. Then, after dessert. The words hit harder than they should have. Familiar now. Heavy with implication. I didn't understand everything they said. I understood enough. Names floated through the air, half swallowed by stone. A first name I didn't recognize. A last name I did, someone important, someone I'd heard whispered in management meetings like a prayer and a threat. Clean, the man said again. No sound. I pressed my back against the rack, glass cool through my uniform. My breath came shallow, careful not to disturb the air. They weren't arguing. They weren't negotiating. They were confirming. The woman laughed softly at something I couldn't hear, and the sound made my stomach twist. Laughter didn't belong down here. It didn't belong anywhere near words like clean and confirmed and after dessert. Footsteps passed above me. Someone opened a drawer. Silverware clinked. Normal life continued a floor away. I told myself I was misreading it. That my brain was filling in gaps because fear liked to invent stories. That maybe this was about money. Or wine. Or something else I had no business overhearing. Then I heard, already in place. I closed my eyes. Already in place meant now. It meant preparation was done. It meant nothing would interrupt what was about to happen unless someone moved fast enough to break the rhythm. I tried to remember the rest of the words. Tried to anchor them in meaning. My mind replayed fragments on a loop, assembling and disassembling them like broken glass. After dessert. Clean. Already in place. Timing matters. Each phrase alone meant nothing. Together, they formed a shape I didn't want to look at directly. I forced myself to move, hands shaking as I scanned labels, pretending to do the job I'd been sent to do. Cabernet. Barolo. A missing bottle that probably didn't exist. My eyes slid over names without registering them. My body knew before my mind did. This wasn't about a fight. Or a threat. Or intimidation. This was final. The voices drifted away as footsteps retreated from the door. The gap above narrowed. Sound thinned until it was just the low hum of refrigeration and my own pulse thudding too loud in my ears. I stood there longer than necessary, waiting for certainty to arrive like a verdict. It didn't. Certainty crept instead. Slow. Relentless. The kind that settled into your bones and refused to be shaken. I thought about the dining room. About the tables dressed in white. About people laughing with mouths full of sugar and wine. About how no one there knew that time had just changed shape. I thought about who might die. I didn't know the target yet. That was the worst part. Death was coming, but it was faceless. Abstract. It could land anywhere. On anyone who'd ordered dessert thinking the night was still safe. My hand started to tremble. I wrapped my fingers around the edge of the rack until the cold steadied me. Breathe in. Breathe out. Don't panic. Panic made noise. Panic made mistakes. I replayed the voices again, slower this time. Examined tone instead of words. There'd been no hesitation. No contingency planning. No talk of what if. That told me everything. They didn't expect resistance. I climbed the stairs on legs that felt too light, like they might detach from the rest of me at any moment. The door opened back into warmth and sound, the contrast almost painful. No one noticed me return. That was the cruel irony of invisibility. You could carry the weight of the room's darkest secret and still be nothing more than a blur moving between tables. I slipped behind the server station, set the clipboard down with deliberate care. My reflection in the steel backsplash looked different now, eyes wider, skin paler beneath the lights. I wanted to tell someone. The manager? He already knew more than he let on. Or he knew enough to pretend he didn't. Either way, he wouldn't touch this. Not with his job. Not with his life. Security? They worked for the restaurant, not for justice. They were there to keep things quiet, not to stop them from happening. Police? I almost laughed. I didn't have names. I didn't have proof. I didn't even have a full sentence anyone would take seriously. All I had were fragments overheard by someone who shouldn't have been listening in the first place. And even if I called, what then? By the time anyone arrived, dessert would already be cleared. After dessert. The phrase echoed again, louder now. I watched table 1 from a distance. The woman leaned in close, her hand resting lightly on Minjun's arm. A picture of calm intimacy. If you didn't know how to look, you'd think she was protecting him. If you did know how to look, you'd see the way his eyes flicked toward exits. The way his jaw tightened when a server passed too close. He wasn't relaxed. That unsettled me. Predators were calm when they believed everything was under control. Prey was calm when it didn't know it was being watched. Minjun looked like neither. I scanned the room, suddenly aware of things I'd ignored all night. A man near the bar who hadn't ordered anything in 40 minutes. A couple at a corner table whose body language didn't match the laughter they performed. A shadow that moved where shadows shouldn't. Already in place. My chest tightened. I couldn't leave. I couldn't warn anyone without sounding insane. I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard what I'd heard. Knowledge didn't ask permission before it changed you. It just arrived and waited to see what you'd do with it. I thought about my mother. About my brother. About the small, fragile life I'd built out of necessity and stubbornness. About how easily it could all disappear if I made the wrong move. I thought about the person who was about to die without knowing why. The room felt louder now, every sound sharp at the edges. Plates hit tables like punctuation. Laughter spiked and fell. Somewhere, a spoon clinked against a saucer, marking time more accurately than any clock. I checked my watch without meaning to. Dessert would be served in minutes. I was alone with something I couldn't unhear. That wasn't a conversation. It was a countdown. I stopped moving and let the room move around me. That was the first mistake people made when panic hit. They rushed. They broke patterns. They drew attention. I stayed still and watched, letting my eyes travel slowly, deliberately, like I was inventorying silverware instead of lives. The dining room revealed itself differently once you knew what to look for. I noticed a man near the bar who hadn't touched his drink, fingers resting on the glass without lifting it. His jacket was too heavy for the room's warmth. His gaze never settled, door, hallway, reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. Positioning, not pleasure. 2 tables over from Minjun, a couple sat close but didn't touch. The woman's smile flickered on and off like a faulty light. The man's foot angled toward the exit, heel lifted slightly, ready. Security stood where they always did, but one of them had shifted, creating a blind spot near the private corridor. Subtle. Intentional. Already in place. My stomach tightened as the pieces aligned. This wasn't a single act. It was choreography. Everyone had a role. Everyone knew when to move. Except the people who were about to pay for it. I followed the invisible lines back to table 1. Minjun sat straighter now. Alert. The woman beside him reached for her glass and took a slow sip, eyes drifting lazily across the room. She caught my gaze again, just for a moment, and something passed between us, acknowledgement, maybe. Or warning. She knew I'd been in the cellar. That realization landed hard. I looked away first. This isn't my world, I told myself. The words came sharp, rehearsed. People like him don't die by accident. Not in places like this. Not without a reason I'd never fully understand. This was organized crime. Power layered on power. Consequences that didn't stop with the person who interfered. They rippled outward, found families, found addresses, found memories. If I stepped out of line, it wouldn't just be me. Fear crept in where adrenaline had been, cold and methodical. I imagined my mother's apartment door opening to the wrong knock. My brother walking home too late. The way retaliation didn't announce itself until it was already too close to escape. I'd grown up learning that survival sometimes meant looking away. My feet stayed planted, but my mind moved fast, running through exits that didn't exist. There was no hero here. No backup. No badge waiting in the wings. Just me, a tray, and a truth I hadn't asked for. The dessert plates began to emerge from the kitchen. Time compressed. I remembered another room, years ago. Smaller. Louder. My uncle's voice raised just enough to make the walls feel thinner. I'd been younger then, sitting on the stairs, listening when I wasn't supposed to. Words drifting up, arguments, threats, promises that meant nothing once the door slammed. He'd left that night and never come back. Not dead. Just gone. Another kind of disappearance that carved its own absence. We'd waited for him longer than we should have. Believed explanations that didn't hold. By the time the truth arrived, it was too late to do anything with it. I'd learned then that silence didn't keep you safe. It just delayed the damage. The memory tightened something in my chest. I watched Minjun again. Watched the way his hand hovered near the edge of the table, ready. Watched the woman angle her body slightly, blocking one side of him while leaving another exposed. Watched how everyone around them pretended not to see anything at all. This was the line. I could feel it now, clear and unforgiving. The moment where a choice hardened into shape. Walk away and live with it. Step forward and risk everything. My breath shook. I thought about the person who was about to die, not as a name or a crime boss or a headline, but as a human body occupying space. Breathing. Unaware. Maybe guilty of things I'd never forgive. Maybe innocent of this particular moment. People like him don't die by accident, my mind repeated. But they do die when everyone decides it's not their problem. The desserts reached table 1. Chocolate gleamed under candlelight. Silver spoons rested beside porcelain like harmless tools. After dessert, my pulse surged. I wiped my hands on my apron and felt the fabric stick slightly to my skin. Sweat. Fear. Proof that I was still human in a room that had turned mechanical. No plan formed. There was no speech. No clever maneuver. Just a pressure inside me that wouldn't let me stay where I was anymore. I took a step forward. Then another. The distance between me and the table felt longer than the length of the room. Each step echoed too loudly in my head. Every face I passed blurred into a smear of indifference. This isn't your world, fear whispered again. Maybe not. But I was already in it. I approached the table with empty hands, no tray to hide behind, no script to lean on. Min-jun looked up as I stopped beside him, his eyes narrowing just slightly. The woman's smile didn't move. I had no protection. No plan. Just a choice already made. I moved like I belonged there. That was the trick. Servers survived by being invisible until they weren't, and tonight invisibility was my only shield. I picked up a fresh glass from a passing tray, let the weight of it ground me, and approached table 1 with the practiced ease of someone whose pulse wasn't racing out of control. Min-jun didn't look up at first. The woman beside him did. Her eyes flicked to my hands, then my face, then away again. A calculation. A silent question. I kept my expression neutral, professional, boring. The kind of face people forgot the second it turned away. Another Glenfiddich, sir, I said, my voice steady enough to surprise me. He nodded once. I set the glass down carefully, crystal meeting linen without a sound. My fingers brushed the coaster, just enough space, just enough time. I let the folded receipt slide from my palm, easing it beneath the glass as if it were part of the ritual. Then, breaking every rule I'd ever been taught, I let my thumb touch the back of his hand. Skin to skin. Half a second. A shock that traveled up my arm like current. His hand stilled. Not a jerk. Not a flinch. Just stillness. Absolute. As if the room had adjusted itself around that moment. I leaned in, just enough to look like I was adjusting the placement. Please, I breathed, so quietly it barely existed. Read it. Then I stepped back. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. The woman's gaze snapped to his face, searching for something to explain the interruption. She found nothing. Min-jun lifted his glass and took a slow sip. His eyes never left her. He unfolded the receipt beneath the table, hidden by the drape of the cloth, movements economical and unhurried. If you weren't watching closely, you'd miss it entirely. I watched anyway. I watched like my life depended on it. 7 words. That was all I'd given him. He read them once. Then again. Nothing changed. No widening of the eyes. No tightening of the jaw. Just a faint, almost imperceptible shift in the muscle near his temple. A tell so small it felt like a secret shared only with me. The woman laughed at something she'd just said, the sound light and practiced. You're awfully quiet tonight, she teased, her hand sliding along his arm. Thinking about business again? Always, he replied smoothly. His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came from already knowing how the night would end. I stood there longer than necessary, pretending to wait for instructions, my pulse skidding. He glanced at me then, not directly, not yet. A sideways look that took in my name tag, my posture, the way I held myself like I was bracing for impact. Understood. The conversation resumed around me, flowing easily, a performance no one in the room questioned. Wine was poured. A server cleared plates. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly. No one else knew the world had tilted. I stepped away on unsteady legs, retreating to the edge of the room where I could watch without being seen. My hands trembled now that the moment had passed. I clenched them together, nails biting into skin, grounding myself in pain. He didn't expose her. He didn't confront her. He didn't react at all. That was worse. The woman leaned closer to him, whispering something in his ear. I saw her lips curve into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A smile that said she still believed she was in control. Minjun nodded, listening, letting her believe it. Then he raised his glass. A toast, he said, his voice carrying just enough to draw attention without alarming anyone. To loyalty. A ripple of polite amusement moved through the nearby tables. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, before lifting her own glass. To loyalty, she echoed. They drank. Nothing happened. No coughing. No collapse. No poison revelation that would make this simple. The danger hadn't been in the glass. It had been in the room. In the people. In the timing. Her hesitation told him everything. He set his glass down with deliberate care and finally looked at me directly. Really looked. Nia, he said, reading my name as if it were a language he'd just learned. How long have you worked here? The question caught me off guard. My mouth went dry. 8 months, sir. He nodded. Long enough to notice things. I didn't answer. The woman laughed, sharp and brittle. Min, you're interrogating the staff now? You'll scare her. His gaze never left mine. Did I scare you? The room felt smaller. The air heavier. Before I could respond, a subtle movement near the kitchen caught my eye. One of the men I'd noticed earlier shifted his weight, hand disappearing inside his jacket. At the bar, the man with the untouched drink angled his body, attention sharpening. Minjun saw it too. Something cold and precise moved behind his eyes. He stood. The motion was so sudden it broke the rhythm of the room. Chairs scraped softly as nearby diners adjusted, startled more by the interruption than concerned. I think, he said calmly, we should continue this somewhere quieter. The woman's hand closed around his wrist. Dessert hasn't even. I've lost my appetite. He turned to me then, his expression hardening into something that looked like irritation. Public. Performative. You, he snapped, his voice sharp enough to draw glances. You spilled whiskey on my suit. I stared at him, confused. Before I could protest, his hand closed around my arm. Firm. Painful. Convincing. I gasped as he pulled me forward, the grip bruising, the act flawless. I'm so sorry, sir, I said automatically, understanding dawning a heartbeat too late. Sorry doesn't fix custom tailoring. Heads turned away in polite discomfort. No one wanted to watch a server get dressed down. No one wanted to get involved. Exactly as he intended. He dragged me toward the back corridor, his voice raised just enough to sell the lie. I'll be speaking to your manager. The woman rose from her seat, panic flickering across her face before she masked it. Min, this is ridiculous. Just let her go. He didn't slow. We were feet from the kitchen doors now. My arm throbbed where his fingers dug in. I could feel his thumb press briefly against my wrist, my pulse point, measuring, steadying. "When we go through," he murmured, his mouth close to my ear, words lost in the noise of the room. "Run left. Don't stop." My breath hitched. The lights flickered. Just once. A strange hum rippled through the air, the sound system stuttering as if someone had brushed against the wrong switch. The man near the kitchen stepped forward. The bar went quiet. And then the lights went out. The dark came down like a guillotine. Not gradually. Not mercifully. 1 second the room glowed with candlelight and crystal and soft jazz, the next it was gone, sound collapsing into screams, light swallowed whole. Glass shattered. A chair toppled. Someone shouted a name that didn't matter anymore. My arm was yanked forward. I stumbled, the world tilting, my shoulder slamming into something hard as Min-jun dragged me through the kitchen doors just as they burst open behind us. The emergency lights snapped on a half-second later, bathing everything in a deep, blood-red glow that turned faces into masks and shadows into monsters. "Down," he hissed. Something whistled past my ear. A gunshot cracked, deafening in the enclosed space, followed by a scream that cut short too fast. My knees hit tile slick with something wet, water, oil, I didn't know, and I slid, palms burning as I caught myself. The kitchen was chaos incarnate. Pans clattered. Flames leapt from a stovetop left unattended. Chefs shouted in 3 different languages, their voices overlapping in panic. And threaded through it all were shapes moving with purpose, too coordinated, too calm. This wasn't random. Min-jun shoved me forward, his grip iron, using my body to block the line of sight from the dining room. She tripped, he barked loudly, pitching his voice to Carrie. "Get out of the way." To anyone watching, it looked like fury. A rich man furious at incompetence. A scene everyone was conditioned to ignore. Behind the performance, his body moved with lethal efficiency. "Left," he muttered under his breath. I ran. Min-jun's finger rested on the trigger. His body coiled, ready to strike, every muscle a promise of violence. I was aware of everything all at once, the grit under my palms, the smell of flour and blood, the way his breath stirred the hair at my temple. The man took another step. Then somewhere behind us, glass exploded. A crash followed by shouting in Korean. The man cursed, attention snapping toward the noise. He gestured sharply, and the group retreated, melting back toward the kitchen. Min-jun didn't move until the sound of their footsteps faded. When he finally exhaled, it was slow and steady, his chest rising against mine. For a heartbeat, we stayed like that, pressed together in the dark while the world burned around us. "That was your distraction," I whispered. "My people," he corrected quietly. He eased back just enough to look at me. In the red glow, his face was carved from shadow and angles, a cut above his brow bleeding freely. He looked unreal. Dangerous. Alive. "We need to move," he said. "Now." We slipped out of the gap and made for the back exit. And froze. A man stood blocking the door. He was massive, filling the space, backlit by the faint glow of emergency lights beyond. A gun was leveled directly at my head, steady as stone. "Boss," he said calmly. Min-jun stopped. Something unreadable crossed his face. Not fear. Recognition. "And," he said, "you're out of position." Orders changed. The words landed heavy. "From who?" Min-jun asked, though I could feel the answer in the way his body went still. The man's mouth tightened. "From the top." A name followed, spoken softly, like a curse. "His brother." Silence fell, thick and suffocating. "I'm sorry," the man said, and for a split second, something like regret flickered in his eyes. "Nothing personal." His finger tightened. Min-jun moved faster than thought. He tore a bag of rice from the shelf and hurled it full force into the man's face. The bag burst on impact, a white explosion that filled the air like snow, blinding. The gun fired. The shot went wild. Minjun slammed into me, knocking us both to the ground as another shot rang out, deafening in the confined space. Rice scattered everywhere, turning the floor into a slick trap. "Run," Minjun shouted. I scrambled, heart in my throat, as he rose into the chaos, violence reclaiming him. I didn't see how it ended. I didn't look back. I ran. I burst through the exit into the freezing night air, lungs screaming, the sounds of sirens beginning to rise in the distance. I didn't stop until my legs gave out, until I was crouched behind a dumpster, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. For a moment, just a moment, it was quiet. My heartbeat slowed. The world narrowed to breath and cold and the fact that I was still alive. Then footsteps approached. Slow. Deliberate. A shadow fell over me. And I knew, before I looked up, that the danger wasn't over yet. The night didn't end when the sirens arrived. That was the lie people liked to tell themselves, that chaos had edges, that once the noise faded and the lights came back on, the danger stayed behind like debris you could sweep away. I learned how wrong that was in the minutes after. I was sitting on the curb across the street, knees pulled to my chest, a silver emergency blanket wrapped around my shoulders. It crinkled every time I breathed, loud and fragile. Across from me, the restaurant glowed again, its windows blown out, its elegance cracked open to reveal the violence underneath. Police moved in tight patterns. Paramedics wheeled stretchers past without looking at me. The air smelled like smoke and winter and blood that had soaked too deep into marble to ever really come out. Minjun hadn't been taken away in handcuffs. He hadn't been taken away at all. I'd watched him step out of the back exit 10 minutes after I did, blood on his shirt, expression unreadable, speaking quietly to two men who had appeared as if summoned by thought alone. They hadn't worn uniforms. They hadn't needed to. Power didn't announce itself. It arrived already obeyed. One of them looked at me. Just once. A long, measuring glance that slid over my face and settled somewhere behind my eyes. That was when I understood this wasn't about a jealous partner or a single betrayal at a dinner table. This wasn't a hit. It was a statement. They hadn't wanted him dead quietly. They'd wanted him exposed. Cornered. Forced to move. Forced to respond. The restaurant, the timing, the witnesses, it was theater. A provocation big enough to demand a war. And Carolina. She hadn't been the top of it. She was leverage. A blade held close enough to hurt, disposable once it had done its job. The real order had come from closer. From blood. From history that predated the woman with the perfect smile and diamond earrings. Family. I felt it settle into my bones like cold. A detective crouched in front of me eventually, notebook in hand, voice gentle in the way people get when they think you're fragile. He asked what I'd seen. I told him nothing useful. Not because I wanted to protect anyone, but because the truth didn't belong to him anymore. The truth had moved beyond paperwork and precincts. It had crossed into a space where law enforcement became background noise. He nodded like he believed me. He didn't. But he let it go. That scared me more than handcuffs would have. When they finally told me I could leave, I stood and realized I had nowhere to go. My apartment was 6 blocks away. My name was on a schedule. My face was on security footage. I had touched a man people were now hunting. I'd crossed a line that didn't let you step back over it. I didn't even have my phone. Someone said my name behind me. I turned. Minjun stood a few feet away, coat pulled on over the torn shirt, the cut above his eyebrow stitched cleanly. He looked composed. Finished. Like the chaos had been an inconvenience already filed away. Everyone else seemed to blur when I looked at him. Like the world knew better than to compete for attention. "You should not go home," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. "I don't have anywhere else," I replied. He studied me in silence. Not assessing my fear, he already knew that, but measuring something else. Resolve, maybe. Damage. "You warned me," he said. "You didn't have to." I hugged the blanket tighter. "I thought it would end tonight." A pause. "It hasn't even started," he said quietly. That was the closest he came to honesty. A car pulled up behind him. Black. Unmarked. The door opened. He didn't offer me a hand. He didn't promise protection. He didn't explain what came next. He simply held my gaze and said, "If you walk away now, you'll spend the rest of your life running from shadows. If you come with me, at least you'll know what's chasing you." The city wind cut through the blanket. Somewhere behind us, the restaurant manager was arguing with an officer about insurance. Life trying to stitch itself back together. I thought about my apartment. My uniform hanging in the closet. The version of myself that had existed before tonight. She was already gone. I stepped toward the car. The door closed behind me with a sound that felt like punctuation. As the vehicle pulled away, the restaurant disappeared from view, shrinking into just another light in the city. Another place where people ate and laughed and pretended violence didn't sit just beneath the surface, waiting for its moment. Minjun looked out the window, jaw set, already planning moves I couldn't see. I sat beside him, hands folded in my lap, heartbeat steady in a way that scared me more than panic ever had. I thought warning him would save my life. I didn't realize it was the moment everything began.